Claiborne and me, COP. You, me, and Claiborne, coffee and philosophy.
Boy, it's that time. Episode 96. Yeah, we're pulling up, getting really close to 2 years here, Copernicus. Did you notice that?
Yeah, time keeps on slipping in the future, as they keep saying, and all we can do is cling on for the ride, right?
Wait, are you a Trekkie? Did I just hear Klingon?
The wrong kind of Klingon, mate. The wrong kind of Klingon.
Okay, because like I was literally gonna say like this is our last show. Like, and you can ask like there's some people here that know my feelings about Star Trek.
Well, I am aware of Star Trek and how it operates in some bits and pieces, but I'm not gonna go to Trek Fest or Comic Con dressed as a uh, Klingon or anything like that. But you got to know these things and understand how they work if you want to be part of the world, right? Doesn't mean you have to like
Yeah,
it.
yeah. See, I mean, I'm what you might call a Star Wars fan. So,
Hmm.
that's actually an interesting topic we could jump into here. Um,
Star
so,
Wars versus Star Trek.
no, I'm just like in general, like the philosophy that's kind of like ingrained into it. Like I've talked about like, there's philosophy and everything, but like there's, I'm not sure if I ever wrote anything about Star Wars, but I know I wrote about Spawn. You guys may have heard of Spawn. And Ron, you're a clown. That's all. But yeah, so I don't know how familiar are you with the War of the Stars there, Cope?
Yeah, well, I know some of the stuff that's going on. The early stuff, definitely there for that. Definitely wars over Trek. I'll tell you that much for free. Um, but yeah, as they sort of like started going from the original three, if you will, I think they started to lose their way until where they are right now, where they are just rudderless out at sea.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like I totally like as far as that goes. Like I have my gripes, but without getting into like all of the fandom like to that extent aspect of it. I mean, you're familiar with like the Jedi, the Sith, right? Like like there's the quote unquote good guys, the quote unquote bad guys, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so like if you ever get into like the extended universe, like reading the books and everything, they have what's actually called like gray Jedi's, and these are basically like the neutral characters. Like they're not Sith, they're not
Just
Jedi.
Switzerland.
Right. Like yeah, like their whole thing is about bringing balance to the Force, the universe, and to accomplish that, they'll operate in very gray ways. So like they're not exactly friendly or an ally to either the green and blue lightsabers, the purple lightsaber guys, or the like the red and black lightsaber guys. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like finding out about that and like kind of getting into that philosophy a bit. Like I found it gets so much more. I guess you could say like in depth. Like there's so much more like meat to it whenever you get into like the expanded universe that apparently doesn't really exist anymore. Because they had to go and make three new movies that disregarded like 30 years worth of books. But yeah, no, that's just that's something that I've always been a fan of, and yeah, like I know some people here likes Star Trek, but I don't know, and like I was never. You know what? Like I will be fully honest with you. Like maybe I need to give it like a bit of a shot as an adult. But like growing up, I hated it. I thought it was like the most boring shit ever. And then like especially watching like the old movies. Oh man, like the new Star Trek movies that had fucking J.J. Abrams attached to it, like stuff like that. Those weren't too bad, but like going back to like the old ones where it's like fucking Picard, hanging out in like
Yeah.
ocean world trying to save a whale or something. Like I was just like, is this a fucking Star Trek movie? But yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well, I
uh,
was going to say, are you talking from Picard back? Because, I understand there is some, hard feelings for people out there with the whole Picard situation. Like some just don't like the guy. But, I don't know. The way that I see it is, similar to you, where it's kind of like, yeah, I get the whole boring side of things because, it is, for the lack of better wording, right? A more kind of like realistic take. Like if we did end up, traveling the stars and that kind of thing, like it's going to be militarized in a sense. Like there's going to be like that kind of construct where there's teams sent out and that kind of thing. So I can see that aspect of it, and I'm like, well, yeah, but it's also kind of boring, right? I can see that people would find it boring, and as much as what I get it, you got to give it props for what it is. Like they do all right. It's not that bad. Is it really, Clay? Like I want to know where it comes. Where does this negative feeling come from?
oh, we're talking about Star Trek, like in general.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like I can tell you, like watching some of the older shows and the older movies growing up, like I just literally thought it was like the worst. Like I just felt like it didn't even like compare. It wasn't even like on the same level as the Star Wars universe. I don't know. It didn't appeal to me at all.
But that's a comparison. You're comparing one thing to another, right? But if you just take it for what it is, that's what I'm saying. Like, don't compare it to something else. Just see it for what it is. Yeah, it's not that bad, right?
Right,
Is it?
right, all right. I'm saying like all of these fillings were like very much established in my like teenage nerddom. I mean like I don't know if I can go back and unlearn this one, but I mean, like I said, I haven't like given these older movies and series like a try as an adult. So who knows? Like hypothetically, maybe I could go back and enjoy them or something. I don't know. If I ever get bored enough and run out of enough stuff to do, maybe I'll give it a shot.
Well, look, if you're looking like at Kirk's era, right? And again, this is from someone who's like, I'm not into this kind of stuff, but I've kind of like had enough interaction to understand how some of it works, right? The Kirk era, where basically he was just flying around in space, having space sex with space aliens and space sex, right? That's what it was all about. Um,
Well,
I can
well,
understand
shit.
that.
Now I think I might actually be interested. When was this?
Well, are you telling me you've never seen the Kirk era of Star Trek?
No, like I said, the stuff that I watched was like Picard, and like I know people like fucking like fanboy love the dude, everything, but I don't know, man. Like I said, it just like literally bored the shit out of me.
Well, look, even just for the good old fantastic acting that came from that, you should at least watch it for that. It is comical.
Okay, Cope.
You have to watch Star Trek.
I tell you what, Cope. I will fully agree that if I find myself with some free time and like literally nothing else I'd rather be doing, I will totally give them a shot.
Well, like I said, you got to start from the beginning. I think if you're going to do anything like that, you have to go from the very start, see the origin stories, and go from there to really appreciate it.
I'll do my best, Cope. Yeah. I don't know, man. What's been going on with you this week? Still haven't like lit on fire or anything?
Oh well, look, there's good news and bad news on the whole front of Australia and the current state of the situation. Um, Essentially, the good news is that we've got a crap ton of rain. Well, not a crap ton. We've got some rain coming through, which it helps things. When the whole place is on fire, a bit of rain kind of helps. The bad news is Australia is so burnt that water is not being held back. It's not being caught by anything, because usually the soil takes it in and that kind of stuff. But we've been in drought for a while. The plants themselves soak up some of this stuff on the way down. They're not there anymore. So essentially, what we have is a flooding situation everywhere now. So we went from being on fire to flooding. How is that?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm not laughing because it's comical. It's just like it's funny because like when they say like it rains, it pours. Like, damn, dude, like I totally know how you feel, man. Like, like I said here, dude, like it'll be like hurricane one year, flood one year. Maybe we'll go back to the hurricane the next year. Like, dude, sometimes we'll get like 2 or 3 hurricanes in a year. You know, it's just like, man, it feels like whenever this shit happens, like it just keeps hitting you and it keeps hitting you, right? But I mean, like on some level, I try to remind myself, you know, like we got to appreciate the contrast, right? Like you can't have the good without the bad, etc. Contrast is the like flavor of existence. But man, sometimes like when the quote unquote like bad is happening, it just really fucking sucks, you know.
Yeah, there's not a lot you can do with it. You just got to roll with it and see how it pans out. But some people have had a very interesting take on the whole Australia situation, and in particular, Australian footballer. Right, I said, we've got a football that's very similar to American football, but a little bit different. And Falau, I believe his name is, and he's a very religious person, and he's saying that the reason why Australia is on fire and flooding all this kind of stuff is because of the homosexuals and all the terrible things that man does on the planet, and this is the wrath of God for being bad human beings. How's that?
Man, so it's funny. I actually got into a conversation about this with lo and behold, people, I know this may shock a lot of you because it actually kind of shocked me, but like I think I might have made like an IRL friend. Usually, like I don't associate with a lot of people in the RL, but we were kind of like getting into some of this stuff and talking about like like the histories of religions and basically like getting into my philosophies on religion, etc. And it's interesting because apparently this person was like actually raised in the Buddhist faith, which like a lot of my philosophy tends to lean towards the Eastern slash Buddhist, maybe like some Hindu stuff, but it's interesting, like finding out that they have some of the same problems like the Catholic Church did and stuff. We can get into that in a bit, but I'm saying all this to like kind of tie into your question. Whenever we went to New Orleans to do like our last meetup thing, there were actually like those. It's not like Westboro, but it was like something kind of similar. Like they were there to like basically like bash on gay people, tell them they're all going to hell and they're all sinners, etc., etc. And yeah, man, I mean, if you like read a lot of the fundamentalist text and you take them at like face value, don't allow for any kind of interpretation or like any kind of thought for yourself, like the more dogmatic you are with these things, it's yeah, man. Like, I mean, I think that's like what's really fucked about it. It's like you gotta understand, like these people like literally believe this shit. Like they're indoctrinated to the point that they literally believe like if you're gay, you're fucking like an abomination. You don't deserve to live, and you're gonna suffer for all eternity. And like they preach this shit. Like they raise their kids to this shit. And here's the thing, right? Like people like to talk about how like their religion is like a religion of love, etc. Blah blah blah. What religion of love would be preaching hate? I mean, like this isn't like you're run of the mill like, man, I hate ketchup on my like this is like literal fucking vitriol about like another human being. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say like we shouldn't have opinions or like make any kind of judgments on the kind of people we want to interact with, etc. But I mean, like when you
Yeah,
can when you
audio,
can
I think, mate.
wait, we lost audio.
Yeah, it cut
Oh,
out for me. I'm not sure about everyone.
oh, okay. Like whenever you can say like you have this religion of love, right? And you can like preach all of this hate and vitriol. And then at the same time, like the leaders of your quote unquote religion are like molesting fucking children. Then they're hiding it. And then they're going around and like literally hiding their assets so that they can't get sued for the people whose lives they've ruined. And all of this is like a religion of love. I mean, I think the fucking contradictions speak for themselves, you know?
For sure, and even in sort of like on the base level, let's talk about like human beings, how they interact with and that thing. what we find is what I like to call selective religion. So you're like religious, like, hardcore, except for this thing, right? So, say for instance, I know a lot of my friends follow the Islamic faith. The big thing with that is the ham, the pork. Don't go near it; it's terrible. So everything kind of like revolves around that. Don't do that. But everything else is cool, right? You can have alcohol, even though that's not allowed, particularly and I'm talking from an Australian perspective, right? Alcohol's okay, but as long as you don't have, right? And this is what I mean. It's kind of like, well, you're kind of like picking and choosing the bits of the religion that you want to follow. We can say the same as like, Catholic, a bunch of other ones that say, premarital sex. Can't do that, right? But people be doing that shit all the time. But you can't be gay, but you can have premarital sex. No problems, right? Um, this kind of like creates a bit of confusion for me because it's like, well, how can you sit there and scream and yell at other people that they're going to hell and throw bottles at them and that, saying that they're going against the religion when you yourself are doing the very same thing? And under that same kind of like realm of the construct that we're putting forward here, does that mean that everyone who chooses the bits of the religion that they want, are they not their own religion by doing so?
Man, see, yeah, and this is like another thing about religions, right? And this is actually to tie into what I was talking about just a minute ago. Learning more from like somebody that's had firsthand experience with like Buddhism, right? Because my opinion of the Catholic Church is very much from firsthand experience, right? Like I was raised in it. It's like all the people that like I knew and interacted with for most of my early life. And like watching all this shit happen has like really colored my opinions, right? But also, I think it's kind of skewed my perspective and thinking that like it's so much worse than other ones. But what you're talking about with like these schisms, like most of the Buddhism that like I think that like I would more closely relate to, and most of it that I've like read and studied about, I tend to lean towards what most people would call Zen Buddhism, but there's actually other branches of Buddhism, and this same thing happened with Christianity. Obviously, that's why there's like Protestant, Catholic, Baptist, etc., etc., etc. Whenever these like, I almost think like you could compare religions to blockchain, right? Like they fork off, and then like these deviations of the main fork become like their own new religion. And then, of course, like, you gotta pick sides, right? Because that's what this are. These are all, like, based on these divisive issues. Like, what's okay? Can a priest get married? Can a priest not get married? Um, it's such, like, a convoluted issue. But, yeah, like, what you're saying with, like, them kind of, like, branching off and starting their own new religions. I mean, I'm 100% agreeing with you on that because that's how most of these have come around. Like look back whenever Martin Luther basically forked off the Church of England, right? Creating shit. I haven't like studied this stuff in so long. I'm probably gonna say the wrong thing, but didn't he like start Protestantism? You remember?
That's well beyond my understanding, mate. You're telling a story. I'm just listening.
Yeah, I'm just drawing a blank on which one he actually. But yeah, I mean, like he was reforming because he was saying like the church is corrupt. One, that they don't want you to be able to read the Bible. That's why Mass was always in Latin, etc. And then at the same time, King Henry VIII was wanting his divorce, and the Pope was playing hardball, trying to, like blackmail him into doing some bullshit to get his divorce. And he was like, no, fuck that. If I'm the King of England, if I want my divorce, I'll do it my damn self. And then, the Church of England became a thing because they broke off from the Holy See. And, yeah, man, and then you get Martin Luther coming along reforming because he's talking about it's all corrupt. And then, I mean, I kind of look at what's going on today, with like all the pedo shit that was happening in the Catholic Church. I mean, to me, it's just like a modern day Reformation. But what really annoys me is that we're letting them get away with shit that we totally should not be. You should not ever let anything that I mean, it's like the best way I could describe this is like one of the world's largest like mega corporations because that's really what it is from like a money making standpoint. They're letting them hide assets. They're letting them get away with like not paying people, saying they have no money, and it's like it's basically been a free pass to go ruin people's lives. The church moves them around and hides them so that they don't actually get in trouble for their actions. I mean, some do. You know, there's like the few sacrificial goats that they throw out there, but like most of these people, you'll never hear shit about it because they've got like all these contracts out there saying what you can and can't talk about. You know, settle for a little bit of money. It's better than nothing. And then, of course, you know, you get like the religious pressure from it. You know, like you don't want to ruin the church, right? Because you're a good, faithful, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, man, like to me, the whole thing is fucked. And I think like anytime you get groups of people together and try to like dictate how everyone has to live their lives, you're going to run into these situations because life's a little bit more complicated than that, right? But also, you get like the kind of like groupthink herd mentality going on where people start feeling like secluded whenever they don't play ball, and then you know like the need to protect the group because they identify with it so heavily, and it's just I feel like it almost like incubates all of these fucking issues that we see come out of it and spew all this vitriol.
Yeah, and in regards to the whole, cover ups and all that thing, but one of the bigger cases recently in Australia, anyway, was Cardinal Pell. And the whole thing is like if you look into it in the depth of the investigation, that kind of thing. Essentially, what the judge ended up saying is like it wasn't that bad, right? And to be clear here, right? This guy, interacted with people that were in his care, right? He was sort of like a superior to them. He's supposed to be a carer, and he crossed the line, right? And as far as I'm saying, is crossing that line is crossing the line, regardless of the how far you go. It's wrong. So when it comes down to the whole justice system interacting with this process as well, it's incredibly flawed. Because if you can turn around and go like, oh well, the thing is, you molested some children and stuff, and you did this and you did, but it's not that bad. It could have been worse. It's like, well, fuck you, sorry, but that's not how it works. So the way that it is perceived by the system as well is also not helping the situation. It's kind of like allowing it to happen and like you said, sweeping it under the rug and shifting things around. It's not just happening within the church; it's happening within the system that is supposed to be, looking after the air quotes the people. It's looking after the people, and it's not really doing its job. So these things combined, it's basically just we just have to put up with it. Is that really how we want to live here?
And I mean, we could draw parallels with this with organized government too, right? Like to me, so much of it is indoctrination. Like, if people are never taught or like never really given the chance to think critically for themselves, right? Like, it's kind of a rigged system when you raise people like their entire life, telling them like, if you don't do this thing, you're going to hell. You're gonna ruin your life for all eternity, right? And it's kind of like you beat them over the head with a carrot, for like 18 to 20 years, and then obviously they're gonna keep chasing that carrot, and then they're gonna like do the same thing to their kids, right? Because like this is what they learn. I mean, sure, like we all have the capacity for free thought, free will, and like the ability to learn how to critically think and challenge these worldviews. But I feel like it's the same thing with the government, where like the odds are like so heavily stacked against you. There's so much like innate indoctrination. There's like the societal aspect, whenever you're basically facing like isolation. I mean, like there's plenty of times where I feel like with my political views and a lot of my philosophy that I'm completely alienated from society. I mean, obviously, like I still operate within it, and I haven't like firmly, I guess you could say, like committed and like made plans to remove myself from it. But there are plenty of times where I would like to. But I also I look at that and I think like, okay, well, is this just me running away from a problem because I feel like it's too big to ever do anything about? Or I mean, like there's so many ways you could look at it. I mean, obviously we all have to be responsible for living our own lives. But man, like I said, it's so complicated whenever you look at the fact that like literally everyone from like the time they're born. I mean, I guess maybe there's like a few exceptions where like their parents are quote unquote woke, but yeah, like dude, I mean, so many people are raised into this fucking game of division politics and indoctrination, and it's just so firmly ingrained into your life by the time you're, like a adult and you're supposed to be able to like go out and do your own thing. All of your ideas and opinions are basically formulated for you because it's what you've been told your whole life. And yeah, I mean, it's like, to me, it's really hard to expect people not to believe this stuff, right? Like if everyone that ever, quote unquote, loved you, the people you're supposed to trust, if they tell you all of this shit and they never like let you, think critically, question things, because obviously questioning it's bad. You don't want to go around questioning the word of God. It's almighty, blah blah blah. But yeah, man. I mean, I guess that would be my question. Like, how the hell do we expect anything else out of people?
Yeah, exactly. The whole thing is being aware of the issue in the first place is key to being able to sort of like acknowledge the problem that's there and apply an intervention. But uh, like you're saying, by the time we get through the systems in place, whether it's the way that we're raised by our family, the social society structure, government systems, etc., I don't really blame people for not being able to break out of these things. Because even if you do recognize, I mean, like, 'cause, let's just say everyone in the audience here, we're all woke. We all kind of see the strings on the puppets. We see the cogs in the system, how they turn, how they work. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. There's fucking nothing you can do about it. And that can be soul crushing, right? Like, how can we expect people to be able to put up a fight against this when it's so big? It's so much bigger than you are as an individual. It can make you feel like, well, there's nothing I can do. I may as well just, stay in the air quotes matrix and appreciate the steak, as opposed to getting work and having to eat, the smush, which is really Weet-Bix for those that want to know, and deal with, a shitty situation. It's better to just be in the whole ignorance is bliss.
Well, I would say like one of the problems too, not just like what can you do about it, but it's like what should you do about it, right? Yeah, I feel like at least from like the perspective that I have now, and I mean I've met plenty of people that are kind of like on the same wavelength, but I guess the best way I could put, like, who am I to tell somebody what's right or wrong? Like who am I to tell anybody what they should believe? Just because I have this worldview and I think it would be great if other people agreed with me. I mean, like, who am I to even say it would be great? Like, what if I got my wish? Everybody was like this cynical, anti-government, uh, fucking, shared all my philosophical views. I mean, one, I feel like the world would probably get kind of boring, right? Because there'd be a heavy lack of contrast. But I mean, also, I feel like whenever I start getting into that mindset of like, what can I do about it? I really do get stuck on the what should I do about it? I mean, I think this show right now is what I do about it. And, if people want to hear it, if they want to like, challenge their thoughts by listening to like some of the things I say and kind of, like processing it, decompressing it, and figuring out how it applies to their own, life and views. I mean, what else can you really do, right? Because, I mean, I can't go around, like, beating people over the head saying, no, you better not go to that fucking church. You better learn for yourself. You better start questioning all this shit. Because what's that going to do? It just literally turns me into the church from a different perspective. Like, that's what they do. They beat you over the head with this shit and tell you anything else, like any deviation is wrong and you're going to suffer for all eternity. You're now some kind of like undesirable, unclean fucking, like scab on the flesh of humanity. It's just, it gets absurd, right? Like, you can't win and you can't like change anything by doing the same exact thing. This is why, like, whenever like if you ever hear like people talk about like libertarianism and stuff like that, and why I like kind of laugh at it, right? Like I don't care who you are, like you can't beat the system by just becoming the system. Like it doesn't work. Like the only thing I think you can really do is remove consent, start thinking for yourself, and thinking critically. Challenge your own thoughts and beliefs too, and figure out what's really true for you, and have some kind of faith in the universe, Jehovah, fucking Allah, whatever the hell you want to believe in, that like other people have this capacity for themselves. And, in the end of the day, we just got to let it do what it do, right?
Yeah. I just found this update on the whole cardinal thing. I'm going to chuck that in the chat. Apparently, he has won a bid to be able to have a retrial, so maybe he will be free after molesting children. Fantastic. Anyway, talking to what you're speaking about there, it's true. The only thing that we can really change is ourselves. But I guess the question that I was getting at there is, if you awaken, right, and you look around you and you look at the system, the way that it works, and it's not so much about changing other people, but you're sitting there going like, holy crap, I am now aware of these things that are horrible things, and everyone around me has been awake, and I am the only one. Everyone's around me is asleep, and I'm the only one who's like really woken up. You look around you, and you first, I think, you go to like, I have to tell everyone, which is what you're right, but people don't want to listen. And after going through all the processes of having a look at the fight that you're going to have, right? You got to fight the people around you, because you're going to be sitting there, saying like, oh well, the government system, and there's nothing backing the dollar and all that kind of shit, and everyone thinks you're a tinfoil hatter, even though the data that you're presenting is accurate. When you start, talking about people like the Cardinal Pell, abusing children, and everyone says that you're crazy, and even though there's a trial here, and he's been found guilty, and now he's going through the appeal and everything, you're still crazy because you thought this beforehand, etc., etc. When you look at the scale of what's going on here, I think a lot of people would ask themselves, and I have myself asked myself, like, is it really worth the trouble, right, of trying to fight this system and trying to, change even just yourself, right? Because let's be real here, the only thing you can change is yourself, right? But the question is it worth it? Because you go through this process of doing these things, and then people start casting you out. Your family disowns you. You're a tinfoil hatter, et cetera, et cetera. And you become very isolated, detached. And so, like I said, the thing is it worth going through this process? I think that's the question that comes down to. And again, going back to what I was saying about the Matrix, that whole scene of the dude eating the steak, and he's like, I'd rather just eat the steak and believe that the steak is real, rather than being aware of what's happening around me and having to eat the mush that everyone that is air quotes awake has to eat. Ignorance is bliss. And I think that's the greatest battle that we have to get through, is the battle with ourselves and the changes that we can apply to ourselves, not to other people, not to the world around us. And like you were saying, hope that things shift, because enough people do that themselves.
I think along these lines too, one of the biggest hurdles is actually nihilism. And like, look, trust me, I have plenty of fucking nihilistic days. So like, I'm not bashing people that like to identify as nihilist, or like most of their philosophy is nihilistic. But yeah, with like people that I've become like very good friends with, had like many of these spirited debates. I feel like we usually hit this plateau where they'll end up telling me like, look, if all of this stuff is, like it is, and, I can't really do anything about it, why even worry about it? Why talk about it? Why not just do my thing and live my life? And like I totally get it, right? Like, I feel like that's something we all have the option to do. And there's plenty of days where that's what I feel like, and like it's not like I do this all day every day. I mean, I feel like I probably could, but I mean, I totally understand, like, not everybody can. Just like, not everybody can dig through, like, truther reports and read about, like, all the pedo politicians and how fucked the government is 24/7, right? Like, I feel like it definitely takes, like, a certain mindset and a certain type of person to be able to, go through all of this and not feel like it just fucking, like, breaks you mentally. And, I mean, who's to say like you should have to keep going? Like keep pushing. I feel like everybody can go into this, find what they need to carry on. Like solve their own existential crisis. And at some point, I mean, I feel like we have to hit that plateau where we at least have like enough faith in the universe that everybody else can do their own thing, or maybe at least like enough acceptance that you know, I can't do anything about it. Accept the things you cannot change the things you can, and let it go. And like, trust me, dude. Like, there's plenty of nights that I've spent sitting there awake, just like worried about all this kind of stuff. But I don't know where I'm at now. I mean, I'm finally like to a point where I can let this stuff go whenever it starts bothering me too much. I don't get stuck in my ruminating thoughts for like, extended periods of time. And whenever I can have these conversations with people and we reach that point where they're like, okay, like, I hear you, like, I can agree, blah, blah, blah. But like, ultimately, like, it's not bringing me joy to continue down this path, then we can leave it alone. And if they want to bring it up again later, then we'll get into it. But like, I don't feel that need to like push my philosophy or agenda on anyone. And I mean, I think that's something that I feel like all of these, religions could really learn from. In my opinion, is like, you're completely fine believing whatever you want to believe, and as long as you're not hurting anyone, I really don't care what you're doing. But whenever you start like showing up to things that have nothing to do with you, and you have no reason to be there, just to tell the people that are there how horrible of people they are, how they should, go kill themselves, they're a blight on humanity, God's gonna smite you, etc. It's like, fuck off, man. It's the best way I can put it. Like the people that want to show up to like abortion clinics and tell women that they don't deserve to live because they're making a choice. Like, look, whether or not I agree with abortion or not, I do totally agree with the fact that you don't need to be a cunt. Like, you don't need to show up and just fucking make somebody miserable for, trying to make what's gonna obviously be one of their hardest choices in their life. Like, sure, maybe they're gonna really fucking regret this. We all have our own lessons to learn. I'm not telling you it's right. And, I don't know, man. We all have to be able to kind of like figure this shit out for ourselves. And I wish we could not try to like force our autonomy onto other people.
Well, it'd be nice, wouldn't it, if we could just do that? And it's a very simple thing. Like, not forcing your autonomy onto another person is something that's very simple to do. Essentially, what you do is when someone tells you something that is not what you would do, something that you don't like. I tend to go to the avocado thing because I'm very divided when it comes to avocados. I like them, I don't like. I don't really like them, right? But I'm supposed to like them because they're healthy for me. But I don't like them, right? But I don't go to vegetable shops that are selling the grocers and that kind of thing, and hold up signs like "Say no to avocado," "Say no to avocado." Like, I don't do that shit, right? Because it's not a big thing. Like, people can eat avocados; it's not a big problem, right? And it should be the same thing. You talk about abortion and things like that. It should be the same thing. Okay, well, I wouldn't do that personally. That's just something that I wouldn't do, right? I don't have to go and have like a huge picket line in front of somewhere to voice that. But unfortunately, what it comes down to is run, have a drink. The human condition. Um, that's we tend to sort of like look down or hate against things that are different from what we are or what we believe. And the good old psychology behind it is a social identity theory, and it's really interesting the way that it sort of like operates. But if you understand it and you apply interventions, you can save yourself a lot of grief because let's be real, there's people that are picketing and making a big deal out of it, whether it's abortion or anything else. Um, they're just leaning into negative emotions. They're putting themselves in a state that is not pleasant, right? Because who wants to go? I mean, I know there's some people that they're happy when it rains. And, okay, fantastic. But to actually gravitate towards situations that are unpleasant and uncomfortable, like, that needs to be something that needs to be looked into itself. Like, dude, like, why are you doing that? Do you really like being hurt? Do you like feeling angry? Do you like feeling sad? Why are you gravitating towards these things consistently? Because, okay, look, there's times when we can go through situations where we want to feel sad. Like, you go through a breakup, something like that. You want to cry, you want to do things like that. So you put on a song that makes you sad, and you get through it, and you're done. You're finished. But for some reason, some people want to cling on to that, and they want to shove their opinions and thoughts in other faces. This is where we have the problem, dude. Please, just let it go, right? It's not hard. And I gave you a little image there, little GIF or GIF, as you like to say, Clay, to help you along. We just need to let it go and just relax, bro. It's not that bad.
Just as an aside here, talking about the whole avocado thing, I honestly, this is one thing that I kind of question too, just throwing this out there. Arguably, is avocado really like as great and healthy for you? I mean, or is this something that like was a agenda that got pushed in the media? But aside from that, like looking at how avocados are grown and how much like farmland is basically just getting clear cut and destroyed by the avocado industry. Like if anybody doesn't know, there's some cool documentaries out there about avocado farming, and they'll actually explain to you why it's so detrimental. There's so many of these just like acres and acres and acres of clear cut land that is like dedicated to absolutely nothing but growing avocados right now, right? And the way they're grown is like so intensive, it destroys the environment there, and then they have to like move on and start growing somewhere else. But like the land is basically like sapped of all resources, and then whenever they stop growing there, it's like a terrible flood risk. And yeah, so just throwing that out there, guys. Even if it is as good for you as they say it is and everything, just look at the industry as a whole and like how some of these things go. Almonds are actually another one, man. Like there's like this, and I mean, I drink almond milk, so I'm just as guilty. But like looking at how these industries are actually like mass producing all of this stuff, it gives you some interesting perspective. Is all I'm really gonna say about it, because like it's not sustainable. Like sure, these might be healthier options, but healthier for us does not necessarily mean it's healthier for like our environment, our planet. Hashtag global warming, Ron. Where's Greta? Where's Greta? How dare you? But no, I mean, like really, like just looking at how these things are done and like the actual impact they have on our planet. I feel like we definitely need to figure out some better ways of doing it. But yeah,
I think just to counter that as well, something that we need to take into consideration here is the whole supply demand kind of thing. Um, when we look at how humans consume, particularly in the West, I mean, I hate to say it, but the Western world does fuck up a lot of shit. Like, um, we throw away a lot of food, right? And I'll be straight up and honest with you. There's been plenty of times when I've bought avocados because, like I said, they're supposed to be healthy for me. I try and mush them up and hide them in my food and that kind of thing. But I don't eat them all. So I'll buy like a pack of like 10 of the bloody things, and I'll eat 2 or 3 of them, and the rest of them go bad because it's just hard for me. So being aware of this, I've just stopped buying avocados. Or if I do buy one, it's for the purpose of whatever it is that I'm cooking. I buy one, I use it, job done. But we throw away a lot of food. There's been a lot of discussion in regards to the food and wasting of food, and we should give it to the homeless and all this kind of crap going on. And of course, there's a counter to that as well. It's like, well, if you can't pay for food, you shouldn't get food, kind of thing. I was, well, dude, it's getting thrown away. It's rubbish. Like, why do you care if a homeless person eats it? Do you just hate the homeless? You want to destroy the homeless? Oh, they don't deserve it. They don't work. All right, that's a different thing, right? But we do have a lot of waste. So let's just say, for instance, we could balance this out a little. Say, okay, well, realistically, this is how many avocados people do actually eat. We can create an environment where we make the correct amount of avocados for the people that are eating them, and the rest of them, we just don't do that. We don't have waste. If we can minimize the waste, it would be a lot better. But the era that we live in at the moment is disposable era. Right? You buy a phone, and a couple of years later, it's out of date. You got to chuck it out because of the updates have made it unusable, blah blah, etc. Same with computers, etc. So we live in this disposable era now, and of course, that's all for making money. And if we can shift that, then maybe, just maybe, the impact of humanity on the planet be as bad, and the whole Greta global warming thing can be reduced a bit because it's balanced is probably the best way to put it. And I think that heading towards that is more realistic than, because you got the whole palm oil shit as well. Like, dude, let's be real. We're chucking a whole bunch of it out. And we're clearing land and all that kind of stuff. If we can stop doing that and just have it a bit more balanced, we can have the best of both worlds. We'll have some of that stuff, right? But it won't be killing the global warming. You there, Clay? Or did we lose you? Yeah, I think we've lost some audios here. You muted.
Hey, Clay, something's happened to your mic. Because
Okay.
the audience can hear me. Oh, there you go.
Okay, I don't know what the hell was going on. I think Discord was glitching or something, but so you guys can hear now?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, I was thinking like maybe Cope needed to reconnect. I don't know. Maybe I needed to, but whatever. It's working now, so fuck it. Shamalama Ding Dong, welcome to the shit show. So, fuck yeah. I don't even know what the hell we were talking about now.
I just got here, man.
Yeah. Did you guys know there was a show going on right now?
I just reconnected.
Well, fuck it. We're getting close to the halfway point. I don't know. Anybody got like a new topic to throw out there? We want to talk about the issues with centralized services and.
Well, I've still got my list.
Pull out the list, Cope. Throw it out there. Let's see. We'll get some emojis on the next topic. But yeah, I'm gonna blame Ron. Maybe Shane. Definitely gonna blame Discord. I don't know what, but yeah, every now and then shit just gets fucky, and I think what happens is basically Ron's cardboard box computer lights on fire.
That's offensive to Australians at the moment.
Oh, I forgot we can't talk about things being on fire. Yeah, no, I mean, I hear you, dude. I'd be offended too.
Well, actually, something that I missed a tab last week when we were talking about the whole face crap. I'm going to chuck it in chat here. I just want to tack this on because this was the point that I was trying to make, actually, and so I missed the point. The whole deep face thing. Apparently, this Zao app that I was talking about, the whole what they're capturing of your face, because what they get you to do is to look into your phone or like whatever you're using to make your face stick onto the scene you want to chuck it on. And it'll look up and down and left and right. You open your mouth and blink and that kind of stuff. Apparently, the issue here is privacy and security because all of the data that they're collecting, so they're collecting a 3D image of your face, and that's being sent to China. And next thing you know, you may be in a lot of trouble giving away your likeness, your image, that kind of stuff. Just thought I'd chuck that out there. But anyway, so some of the other topics that I've got happening here on the list. Let's see.
I feel like one thing that's important to be mindful of anytime we're sending, like this biometric data to any of these mega corporations, like the people that are sending their DNA into 23andMe and like all that bullshit. You know, like I think if we look at like historically, what do these like mega corporations do with your, you know, like your identity, your information? It should be pretty obvious they're gonna sell it. Like that's how they make money, right? So like you know, I would even go so far as to say like even without this like app or this software or whatever, right? You know, like think about like all the apps like Snapchat, like all these images you put on Facebook or Instagram, like they're totally gathering this information either way. Now, you know, whenever let's get a little Orwellian here with like 1984. You know, whether you believe in the concept of like Big Brother or not, like the information's out there, and I feel like it would basically just be like absurd to not think that at this point they are using this for some kind of purposes, you know, whether it's tracking people, whether it's creating some large database of the human race to be able to like easily find people whenever they disagree that, you know, Eurasia's always been at war with East Asia or whatever the fuck, you know. Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, people, what topic do you want to hear about?
Yeah, that list is a little bit mixed up because there's things that we've talked about, and I need to really update the list a bit better. I just when I feel like something's interesting, I'll chuck it onto the bottom of the list. But I need to sort of like do an audit on what we have discussed already.
Okay, what is the 21 and 22 conventions? Like, I'm not familiar with this, so just give me like the Eli 5 real quick.
All right, so basically, it's a bunch of men telling women how to be women better. Right? Let's make women great again. And to be honest, I probably should have done a bit more research on that one before chucking it on there. But I thought it was pretty interesting to have, you know, a group of men telling women how to be better women.
Oh man, I mean, I think if we look at the current state of you know, society, the SJW movement, the I'm offended, getting triggered, social media, fucking righteousness society that we live in, we now live in a world where men can identify as women and fight for rights that women don't need or want, and can then accuse you of being sexist for not giving them these rights, you know. Like here's one. Why does any man need to go see a gynecologist? You know, we got into this before, right? Like, why would any woman need to go see a male doctor? You know, like these things. Like, there's nothing about this that relates to equality. This is fucking relates to insanity. Like, if you don't have the body part, you don't need to go force somebody that works with and around that body part to, you know, join in your insanity and fucking play your crazy ass game. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there that will just take your money and, you know, play fucking imaginary pretend world with you. But like whenever you're trying to like set these precedents that like legally people have to do these things that make no sense, we're just making more and more of these crazy fucking laws. And I mean, we can look back at so many laws, you know, like all the victimless crime laws that we have on the books, all the people sitting in prison for shit that didn't hurt anyone. You know, it's just like we're getting into fucking, it's definitely clown world, dude. You know, like calling somebody by the wrong pronoun in Canada can get you thrown in jail now. I mean, it's just, ugh. But yeah, I don't necessarily think men need to tell women how to be women or women need to tell men how to be men. But I mean, I think we can all have discussions and, you know, talk about things critically and, you know, like figure shit out together. But I mean, like telling women how to dress, you know, like whether or not they, I mean, dude, like all of my preferences are my preferences, right? Like I don't expect every woman to like live up to my preferences and, you know, conform to them or anything like that, right? And I mean, I would, you know, not want all women trying to tell me what I need to do with my life, how I need to look, act, etc. But I mean, I don't think that's even a gender thing, right? Like, I don't want anyone telling me this shit. Like, I want to be autonomous, make my own decisions, and live my fucking life. And, yeah, I mean, I feel like making that like a gender issue is just yet another fucking example of the insane society we live in.
Yeah, well, there's definitely the whole I'm offended culture coming into this kind of. So it's very difficult to to even understand how all of this works, how it comes together, how people pay for these kinds of. But in regards to this convention, essentially, it's a bunch of for what a lot of people would call toxic masculinity, and pushing that kind of agenda where men have to be a particular thing and they have to play a particular role, and the same for women. And I think this is the difference between the 21 and 22 numbers. Like, one is for men being men, and the other one is the same people that are telling men how to be men, telling women how to be women. And yeah, how are you supposed to interact with this thing? Like, seriously, it's a bit ridiculous. But the fact that it gets coverage, it gets that kind of thing, it kind of like makes it real. It's, you know what I mean? It's kind of like you repeat a lie often enough and it becomes a truth. In a lot of cases, I'm not saying. But what it does lean on, as far as I'm concerned, so the construct of what makes and again, air quotes, a real man and a real woman. And the answer is social construct. But the thing is, like, for each individual, each to their own kind of thing. So, what, say, some woman thinks that a real man is, has to have muscles, and they have to have a beard, and they have to have, like, this is their sort of like image of what a man needs to be. The woman that's standing right next to her, the perfect image of, a man has to be able to cook and has to be able to this and has to be able to that. I think it's down to the individual, and for us to try and say, well, this is what a air quotes real man or a real woman is a bit ridiculous, because it really comes down to the individual, what they're seeking, and for the individuals themselves as what they want to do. And if they don't comply with your, air quotes, perfect vision of a man or a woman, then leave them alone, right? It's got nothing to do with you. Okay, so, a man doesn't cook. Oh, no, terrible. You're not a real man. Like, no, I'm just not an air quotes real man to you. It's your perspective. Leave me alone, right? And find somebody who does meet your, criteria, your ticks your boxes and that kind of thing, if you will. And the same the other way around. Like, how can this be so difficult for people to understand without having to, make conventions to basically dictate to people how they need to act because they are, X gender, X sex, X, like whatever it is that's there. I mean, like, at what point do we realize that this is bullshit? And the more that we engage with it, the more that we promote it.
I would say I'm going to speak on like this topic as a whole. Kind of like all of these similar issues that we see popping up. My personal opinion on this is these are all symptoms of a sick society. And when I say sick, I don't mean like sick as in like it's gross, blah blah blah. I mean like sick as in we don't know how to be like autonomous, critical thinking individuals, and we conform to these groupthink societal opinions, and it's not healthy. I feel like this hits us like on so many levels, right? Like, women are constantly bombarded from a young age that they need to look like these, fucking models in magazines and on TV and blah blah blah. Men are indoctrinated into this, like, you can't cry, you gotta be hard, like all of this bullshit, right? Like all of these fucking memes that like society perpetuates onto us and teaches us about, like it's fucked, right? Like it forces like so many like assumptions and expectations about how your interactions with like the opposite sex are supposed to be, or I guess you could even say like the same sex, right? For gender confused people, or misidentified, whatever. I don't know what the fuck we're calling shit anymore. I'm not the most politically correct. I think we've figured that out. But
how dare you?
I mean, it is what it is, right? But I mean, like, again, I feel like so much of this comes down to we don't give people the tools they need to become critical thinking, like extremely self-aware individuals. I mean, do some people still manage it? By all means. But I mean, I feel like this is like, how do you expect people to go looking for something that they don't even know, like, exists, right? I've said this before, talking about like my own personal experience. I've heard the words, like narcissism, perspective, self awareness. Like, I heard all these words, but I never had any idea what the fuck they were actually about. Like how do you expect people to like fully grasp something that like we never taught them? Like no public school in the U.S. I can guarantee you is teaching you about self awareness and consciousness. Like it doesn't happen, man. Like this is not indicative of a society that wants wage slaves and, people conforming to being fucking cogs on the machine. You can't be another brick in the wall if you're fucking questioning everything, and, like it requires conformity. It requires you falling in line and playing the game, not answering the fucking questions and not challenging anything. Like, they literally want you to just do what they say and accept it at face value and, go along with it. But yeah, like when I say these are symptoms of a sick society, like this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, where do you think all these ideas came from? It's the same fucking rhetoric that we've had pushed on us our whole lives. Like, most people just don't ever learn to question it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you're asking people to understand a sense that they don't have. And for the basic senses, we've got 5 senses. If we were to take one of those away, so someone who can't smell or can't hear, you may be able to describe the concept of smelling and hearing and that kind of thing. But for the person that doesn't have that, it's not possible for them to understand it completely. I mean, they can kind of get an idea of what you're talking about, but they don't understand it. So if someone has a sense that they're not using, then how can it's the same kind of thing. It's like pushing them towards that to understand something that they've never really used before. It's going to be kind of like, baby deer territory. You're not really feeling uncomfortable, that kind of. But the purpose of us being in this state is for monetary gain, and to be able to, have groups or people force their autonomy onto others. And while we're in this this kind of like mental state of everything's for profit and you have to be making money and take advantage of another person if you can and that kind of thing, we're going to see the same kinds of things happen. So again, going back to something we've said before, it becomes a point of self-awareness, understanding what's going on and applying interventions to be able to break away from it. But that can be difficult in itself, because once you start doing things differently, you're seen as an outcast, an outsider, and that kind of thing. So how can we expect people to be able to do this when all these things are against them? It's near impossible. So again, going back to what I was saying before, you can't hate on people that that are in that state of like not knowing and not aware of what's going on. And a lot of people can go their entire lives denying who they are as an individual, the things that they want to do, etc., because of the programming that they've had since birth. I don't know. It's difficult to try and battle this kind of thing.
Yep. And we could probably tie this in with one of those other topics up there, talking about like your inner child, right? This is something that I always kind of thought was like absurd. Like, I'll be honest, like I thought it was like a joke, like my inner child, I'm nourishing my inner child, blah blah blah. It sounded like a fucking, like a joke to me, right? But whenever I started actually like, gaining some self-awareness, started like learning how to break down my own beliefs, examine my life, etc., I did find like there are things, I learned in my childhood that like formatively shaped who I became. They heavily influenced things, and they helped shape my beliefs into my adulthood. And it wasn't until like I went back and revisited these things with like greater perspective, kind of like dissected them with a better understanding of, like the world in general, etc., that I was really able to, like change my worldviews on some of these things. I mean, like one of them I remember writing about was like when my grandmother died, right? Like I feel like it definitely instilled like a firm fear of abandonment in me, and it kind of like really reinforced like this idea that like you shouldn't get too close to people because they're just gonna leave you, right? Like it's rough, right? But like you can't really see these things at like 12 or 14. Like you don't really get the implications or like the full understanding of what this means going into the future, right? But like whenever we like adopt these beliefs and we kind of like shape our worldviews around them, and we never remember to like go back and actually examine them. I think that there's some definitely some truth in that phrase, like your inner child, because like you need to go back and figure out where do my beliefs actually come from, because we hang on to so much stuff that isn't really true to us anymore, right? But it's like we've held on to it for so long, we don't really even realize we're doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was going to put a little thing in the chat here. The whole Denise saying about face. I think that kind of like leans on the inner child section as well, which is, for me, I believe the third face in that construct there is the face that you don't show anyone. Because when we get up and we get out into the world, it's like, we put on masks and we have to, play particular roles. We have to be, whoever we are for the employer. Like if you're a teacher or if you're, like whatever it is that you're doing as a role for your employment, you put on a mask, you put on a face, and you have to be this person. Say for instance, like a police officer, right? You think, police officers, and if you stick to the construct of what police is air quotes supposed to be, not what they actually are, Ron, I know you're going to complain about this. Essentially they're supposed to be there to help people, and you have to be an upstanding citizen and all this kind of stuff, right? And that's the face that they supposedly. Now, when they are not on the job, they're taking drugs, they're doing under the table deals, and they're human beings. That's another face that they're wearing. But bringing it back to who we are as a person, we only show this third face to ourselves. This is a conversation with ourselves, and that's what I believe is the inner child. Like that's moment where everything else has gone away. You're with your own thoughts, and you really start trying to analyze what it is that's going on, trying to feel what's going on, and it's the person that you've locked away. I mean, it's called the inner child, and if we don't imagine it as being a literal child, but more along the lines of being the person that you really are, that you hide away from everyone because it's easy to get hurt. It's easy, to be get shit twisted up. It's easy, like all these things that are hurtful and harmful. We create these faces for, and this can, in some way, be linked to the whole dissociative identity disorder kind of thing, where at that extreme scale, we create completely different personalities that emerge to deal with particular situations. On a dialed back stage, that's kind of like what we're doing every day, is like we present that. But that inner child yourself, you're scared to show that to people because, of what other people may think and that kind of thing. So connecting with that and gravitating towards the true thoughts and feelings of who you are as an inner child, making that congruent with what it is that you're doing on the outside world, can link to sort of like a better feeling of existence, rather than feeling that you're lying and you're not being genuine and honest.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I guess we could get into like the Freudian view with like the id, the ego, the superego. I mean, I feel like that's kind of what these are talking about, right? Like, the id is like your societal expectations, the face that you show everyone, the one that you think you have to be, etc. And then we get into the ego, which is, the one we show ourselves, the one that comes out sometimes when people are like heavily, involved in our lives. And then, like somewhere buried deep down is where we have that, like a true self. And it's interesting, right? Because I feel like so many people never get to the point to even realizing that there's more than the ego. Like a lot of people, embrace the ego and think like, okay, this is it, this is who I am, I am the voice inside of my head. But I mean, at least from my experience, I can tell you, I was really glad whenever I managed to break past that, right? And I can remember, I actually think I was like listening to a Watts lecture whenever he was talking about, you're not the voice inside your head, you're the one listening to it. And like I really had to meditate on this for a while and really think about like, the truth and the wisdom in these words. And like whenever it, like really set into me that like, damn, like it's true, and like really getting to that point where I can embrace it and start, changing the way I react to the world, the way I view the world by just basically being able to tell that voice inside of my head to just shut the fuck up or just ignore it, etc. And being able to look past that like tainted worldview and seeing that there's more to reality than what like my most toxic and negative thoughts are telling me. But yeah, I mean, like this is kind of like one of those, Plato allegory of the cave moments. Like, how can you tell somebody there's something beyond that voice inside of your head? Like you can't. It's not something you can show somebody. Like most people will probably think you're crazy.
I mean, yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say as well, because the whole concept of the id, the ego, and the superego, it kind of like translates to insanity being a reality in every single one of us, right? Because with the Freudian concept of that, essentially the id is kind of like the devil inside, right? So when you're cruising down the street, and you see, somebody's wallet hanging out, there's a few dollar bills hanging out the back, and you're like, I could take that right now, right? That fleeting thought is kind of like the id stepping up, right? And saying, yeah, do that. That's even though it's naughty, like, it's bad, right? And you got the super ego, which is kind of like the angel version of this, right? Where, it's kind of like, oh, take the money. And then this other thing steps in and says, hey, man, that's not right, man. You shouldn't do that. It's not your money. So that's like the super ego stepping in. And the actual ego is supposed to be kind of like the air quotes normal one. Like, so the person, and picture a devil and an angel on each shoulder, right? We've seen this construct a few times in cartoons and things like that, right? So if this is what is really happening inside every single person, is that not really insanity being a reality? And if we're all coping with this, are we not all crazy?
We're all mad here, Cope. Like I even put that in the I think I put that in the announcement post tonight. Like I think I've mentioned this before, but like I actually, it's so interesting, man. Like looking back at things that like I did before, and just kind of like following them to their logical conclusion, right? Like I wrote my I think you call it like a thesis or like a dissertation or whatever. It it literally had like nothing to do with my major, but I wrote my whatever, like my big paper for when I graduated college. I wrote it about the political and like societal implications of Alice in Wonderland. And yeah, man, like I think this is at a point in my life where I don't think I even really knew what the word philosophy meant. And like looking back on it, it's just interesting how like so much of these things, like I could always kind of like see the world through this lens. But again, like this is a point where I didn't even really know myself, right? Like I was still very much stuck in the ego phase. And it's just interesting like seeing that there are like points in my life where myself was totally shining through. But like even then I still couldn't see it, But, you can't see the forest for the trees until you can, right? It's just really fascinating. Like I've written before about like my NDEs. And like so much of this stuff, like it all makes sense in hindsight, right? Like hindsight is always 2020. That's something that I try to remind myself of, like whenever I feel like things make no fucking sense, like life sucks. When I get into that mindset, is like I wonder what I'll be thinking about, like this moment, this experience, like this formative event in like 10 or 20 years from now, right? And I think being able to like be mindful of that, and also kind of like embracing the idea of like, who am I to say what's good or bad, right? You know, like in the grand scheme of things, we don't know how this is going to play out. Like, obviously, like one of the most uh, fucking detrimental experiences of my life that like I really like felt like it was going to kill me turned out to be the fucking spark that started all of this. And you know, obviously, I it's kind of hard not to have some kind of appreciation for it, right? Like the suffering leads to the change, and you know, the change just does what it implies. You know, it changes everything. And if you can appreciate who you are, then you have to be able to appreciate how you got here.
Yeah, I think something that you mentioned there in regards to being sort of like the self awareness and self actualization, I think comes from just even being able to understand that, right? That the voices in your head, who you are, and that kind of thing. The stepping away from the what I call the autopilot of life. I think that's what the self awareness and self actualization is. It's not like an enlightenment where a beaming light shines down from the heavens and suddenly you float above everyone else, and it's not about that. It may seem that that's what, but it's about being able to look at yourself and going, okay, well, what am I doing here? What have I been through? And because I really think that when it comes to life, it's about lessons and learning that comes from living a life and being able to shift and adapt to get to a place where you're really happy. Because let's just be real with like what we're doing here. We live, we exist. We don't really know what it's for, but realistically, we all just want to be happy. Now, what makes us happy can be that thing that makes you happy, whether it's a career, having a family, whatever it is. Like it's your design. It's like a free and open world. But to be able to like look at the surroundings and go, okay, well, I can understand all of this, the constructs, the structures, the social constructs, government structures, that kind of thing, and go, okay, well, yeah, I see this, I understand, and what I'm going to do is design my life around that. That in itself is like our purpose. And I think that kind of like self awareness is what we need to be able to be happy and to live the life that we want to live. Unfortunately, not all of us get to that point where we question things enough to be able to reach that conclusion.
Yeah, you know what might be like, this is definitely a very related topic since to bring tie into something you just said here. But you know, there's a lot of philosophical questioning around whether or not happiness exists. Are you familiar with this, Cope?
No, tell me.
Okay, well, basically, happiness, like this idea of happiness, this concept that we create of like what is happiness, right? The feeling associated with it, etc. It's always based on things that have happened, right? And we're always in search of and like trying to do things, etc., that make us happy, right? But if you think about it, you know, the only time that ever exists is now, right? When I feel like whenever we're truly quote unquote happy, we're not aware of it. You know what I'm saying? Like we're not seeking it and we're not dwelling on it. So like whenever it's actually happening, we don't notice it. You know, like yeah, I feel like it's very easy to be conscious of like when we're content, but like actually being, I feel like being conscious of the idea of happiness is to like take away from it in some kind of way, right? And yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of people that probably like dig more in depth to it than I am right here, but uh, yeah, I mean, it's like at that very moment that you start, you know, conceptualizing it, creating it as like that thought form in your brain, and thinking like you either have it, don't have it, have to get it, had it at some point. Like whenever it gets to that point, you're no longer actually experiencing it. You're no longer existing in it because you know, like you're inside of your head, you know, and you're basically like overthinking it, you know. So I would say like I think part of the argument is that happiness is very like subjective, and it's definitely based on comparison. You know, like I'm happy now, but I'm not happy then. Like we can look at relationships. I was happy when I was in this relationship, but not happy when I was in this relationship. And if I could get back to a relationship like this, then I would be happy again. Like that ties into like jobs, that ties into, like hobbies, blah, blah, blah. Like all these things that we think make us happy, we're either pursuing them or we're remembering them. But whenever we're actually experiencing them, does the thought of happiness ever really come into our minds?
I don't know. I would argue that because there's plenty of situations that I'm in, or I have been in, where I'm like, man, I'm so fucking happy right now. This is the shit. Um, yeah, and moving a little bit away from masturbating in your own feces while reading Guns and Ammo, which I know Ron likes when I say that. But there's things that you like to do. So, say for instance, when I'm driving, race driving, kind of thing in particular. Say if I'm out on the circuit and I'm driving around, like I love cars, I love building cars, I like driving cars. There's all these things that are kind of like I like this shit. And when I'm actually doing it, and I'm focused on turning in the corners and making sure I get a nice drift out of the corner, all these bits and pieces, I'm just like, man, this feels good. I like this. That is what I associate to happiness. And I may not be sort of like sitting there thinking it the whole time, but when I'm doing it, I'm like, man, this is the shit, right? And I'm sure that again, the whole masturbating and feces. If that's what you're into, right, chances are you're going to keep going to that because it's something that you enjoy. And when you're doing it, you have a particular feeling. So I do get where you're coming from in regards to thinking in the future about doing this particular thing, then thinking back on the times you've done it before and going, man, I like that, right? But during the time when you're actually doing it, there can be moments when you have these feelings and you associate that with being happy. I got that image that I chucked in there. But what I was looking for is, have you ever seen that? I've got a picture of it, but it won't let me chuck it up there. That's a Crazy Girlfriend chick, right? And there's this image of kind of like a stairwell, and there's she's punched a whole bunch of knives into the wall, and it says, "I'm so fucking happy." And I think that we can be aware of the happiness when we're doing it. It may be fleeting and it may not be something that happens all the time, but we can be aware of it all the time. So I would contest that in some way. The image, just chuck it.
Yeah, and I mean, like I can only relate to my own experiences, etc. But I feel like whenever I start getting into my mind and I start like thinking like, damn, like this is great. I'm really happy right now. What I think I really am is content. Like, if this makes sense to you, I feel like that's where I really am, right? When I feel like everything's in a good place, I don't have a lot of shit to complain about right now. I feel like things are going great, etc. I personally, I feel like what I'm actually doing is feeling content. Now, I don't know. I can't really even tell you where I fall on this argument about does happiness exist or not. But I can tell you, like, I've totally been, like, doing things, having a good time, etc. And, I mean, I know what you're talking about, where, like, you'll start reflecting on it, and you're like, damn, like, I'd like to keep doing this, this is great, etc. But here's the thing, though. Like, at some point, it comes to an end, right? Because, like, it can't stay forever. Now, I don't know if this is just appreciating the contrast here or not, but, like, even like looking at relationships, right? Like just because you were happy and doesn't mean you're going to always be happy, right? Like it's not always rainbows and butterflies, magical unicorn fart experiences, right? But, like I feel like if we at least manage and like learn to be content, kind of like, ride those waves out and not like, for example, like run away every time shit starts going wrong, like a relationship starts struggling, etc. But like, I don't know. All I can say is like from my personal experience, I've started looking at a lot of this stuff as like when I'm content. And I now try to make sure that I'm content regularly, right? Like that's my goal is contentment. Now, I obviously I have moments where I get excited. I think like, damn, this is awesome. Maybe I'll use the H word. Maybe I'm happy, but like to me, I feel like it comes from like an overall place of like contentment, right? Like I have to be all of my needs are being met currently. Everything feels like it's going great. I don't know if I don't know, maybe it's just my perspective, maybe it's the way I wrap my mind around it, but like I can totally see why a lot of people question whether or not happiness is a real thing, or it's just like the proverbial carrot that we're always chasing, thinking we have to have it, we have to do something to make it exist, etc. You know, obviously we're all going to have our own perspectives and opinions here, but I definitely think it's a good question to really contemplate, because especially like whenever we get into like our darker moments, you know, when we're more depressed, we're not feeling content, we're feeling that struggle. I feel like whenever we get caught up in like that, damn, I wish I could be happy again, and like, you know, start ruminating on the old events and start thinking about like what we need to have into our life to change everything. Yeah, I feel like it almost like pulls us further and further away, right? Because like the only time that ever exists is now. And if you can't be content right now, you can't be happy right now, then you know the only thing to do is change your perspective, change your outlook, and you know accept the things you cannot change the things you can, and move forward, right?
Yeah, I'm down with it. I'm down with it. Just speaking to what Alpha's saying here in the chat space in regards to content being okay and that, and you know, you'd prefer something else. I think that content just means comfort, right? That's the understanding that I have. Is like, yeah, things are okay. You know, they work, and you know, there's nothing really to complain about. Things could be better, things could be worse, but it's kind of like middle ground, probably the best way to put it, right? That's my perspective on content. That's why I think like the whole thing of happiness is beyond that point of content. It's not like everything's okay, but like when things are like really going your way, right? Well, like things are just how you want them, you know, you couldn't ask for more or less. Then that's kind of like that happiness zone. Right? I'm going to call it more of a zone than anything else. But I'll put it to an analogy of like video game, where essentially like you start playing a game, and of course like you bought the game because you're interested. And you start playing the game, you know, it gets hard, but you keep playing, and you know things get difficult. So you grind, you overcome, you succeed, right? And I think this kind of like speaks to what you're saying before about you know the contrast, the light and the dark, you know, the twilight zone in the middle, and everything. That is like you go through these processes, but in these peaks where things, you know, you succeed, you beat the boss, right? This particular boss of this level, fantastic. You make it to the next round, and you start fighting the bad guys on the next level, and they're harder. So, you know, it's a bit of a challenge. You get there and get to a point where it's like it's too hard, and like, what do I need to do here? You keep grinding, you keep pushing, keep going, and then you get to that peak where you beat the next boss. And for that fleeting moment there, where you're sort of like having that experience, you are happy. But you can acknowledge that at that time. I think that we do have the capability to understand what we are going through in the here and now, and understand that that is happiness, even if it's fleeting. Not only on the tail end of it when you've done it, or leading up to it, like seeing like this is coming, I'm going to be happy when I do this, but also when you're there. But it does take that self reflection, the ability to take that step back and look at it and go like, okay, well, this is me being happy. Like I know this feeling. Like you know, the blood's pumping, the adrenaline's going. You know, like I've got a smile on my face. I'm hooking into the corners. You know, driving the way that I should, and that kind of. That's not to say that you're not going to blow tires, you're not going to roll cars, you're not going to do that kind of thing. Like that's what you take, right? To have that moment of happiness, to have that, to get there, you have to go through the rubbish. You have to deal with that. But I do think that we can comprehend what it is that we're going through at that particular time if we choose to sort of like take that moment and absorb it and take it in. That right now we're happy.
So here's a thought. Do you think we can be addicted to happiness, or like, you know, at least the idea of it?
Yeah, and I think the opposite of that can be true as well.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that. I can totally see that there are people out there that are just like totally addicted to their own misery. You know, like they're always like seeking validation in their misery. You know, like they always want to talk about it and share it with everyone. Now, I think if you asked them about it, they'd probably say, of course, I'm not like trying to be this way, et cetera, et cetera. But like, you know, I guess, I don't know. We could get into a whole philosophy about that, but I mean, like, our perspective creates our reality, right? Now, I think like the reason I really wanted to get into this is like I was also having a conversation this week about delusional positivity, right? Now, you know, like the people that try to like make everything positive in their world outlook, you know, find the silver lining in everything, et cetera, et cetera. I really wonder, like on some level, are we almost just like addicted to this thing, this concept, call it happiness, whatever you want to call it. Are we always just like chasing that next hit? Because like what you're saying, I mean, I think we both agreed here. Like it's definitely fleeting whenever you have these moments of, like ecstasy, like these wonderful, like brilliant, quote unquote happiness moments. Like it's like by the time you're in your head and thinking about it, like it's past. At least in my experience. I mean, maybe you can go right back into it. Maybe you just pulled out for a moment to contemplate it and then let it go. But the whole thing is, it's definitely fleeting. Like nothing golden can stay, right? You're not staying golden, pony boy. But yeah, I mean, like I wonder if on some level it's like literally a psychological addiction. We think we have to have this thing that we don't currently have at the moment. We're in perpetual pursuit of it. We always need that next fix. But yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting idea to get into. And I mean, I think it's something we all have to kind of figure out for ourselves. But who's to say? I mean, is it sustainable, Cope? Like, can we always be chasing that next hit of happiness and feeling completely, like satisfied with the world because it's always just magical rainbows, butterflies, and unicorn farts?
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely possible for people to do that. Unfortunately, what it takes is drilling a hole in the back of your head so you're fucking high all the time. Yeah, lobotomies and that kind of thing. But it is possible. But it's not natural. That's the thing, right? The whole thing of our existence, right? Regardless of where you're looking at it, it's not like static, right? Even the concepts that we had of static universe in the past have been sort of thrown out the window because we need to have that opposition. There needs to be light and dark, right? We can't appreciate one without the other. And also in between, like I said, there's a twilight in the middle when one switches to the other. And I think we can get fixated on being on one end of the spectrum or the other, or as some people see it, as more of a continuum. It's just that we cannot sense these things because we have very limited senses. We're primitive beasts. But if we have this understanding that is a back and forth, when we hit our lows, and if we're not happy with it, some of us are happy in the low. Those of us that are not happy in the low, it is a contrast, comparison from when we actually get to those highs, because when we get there, we appreciate them a fuck ton more. It's a very similar thing as when we see people, say, for instance, that come from money, if you like to put it that way, and they don't really appreciate money, how hard it is to come by for some people, what it takes to save, to earn something, to work for something. These feelings, emotions, the things that you need to go through to get there are lost on people, and they don't have the concept and the understanding. They burn money because they don't appreciate it. I think it's the same thing with our feelings and emotions through sadness and happiness and everything in between. That we need to appreciate them for what they are, right? And because these things can be fleeting as well. Like happiness is a bit harder to attain and hold on to for longer periods of time. But like I said, you want to drill a hole in the back of your head, feel free. You have it 24/7. You're going to have a really crazy look on the world, but you'll have that feeling 24/7. On the other end of the scale, when we're talking about insane amounts of depression, anxiety, and that kind of thing, that's when we're still like sitting there dwelling in the negative. But the truth lies in the middle. We need to bounce between these two to be able to appreciate them. And there's a healthy level of doing so, and there's an unhealthy level of doing so as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I feel like I'm definitely like a person. Maybe it's just me from like my own experiences. Maybe contentment is just like my happy place, But I mean, I can tell you, like even days, like maybe everything's just fine, and like I'll still have like that urge to just go put on, like dark, fairly depressing music and just kind of, like sulk in it and marinate in it for a while and just kind of like get caught up in those feels. Like, I don't feel like it's coming from like a place of depression or anything, Like, I feel like it's healthy to, I mean, at least for me, to like kind of experience like the full range of emotions and, again, like I get into like the happiness / ecstasy thing. I mean, like, do we have those moments of like pure bliss, etc.? Sure, but again, I question like, is that happiness? I mean, I think there are better words for it, like bliss, ecstasy, etc. I mean, in my personal experience, my journey so far, I feel like the only time I'm really happy is just when I'm completely content and I don't feel like any heavy desire to change anything. You know, I'm not in pursuit of something. I don't feel like some giant lack of anything is in my life. And, you know, it is what it is, right? Like, to me, that is happiness. Like, that zen moment where it's just all okay and fuck it. You know, I'm just along for the ride. Now, I do totally agree with you. Like, there are those moments, but like in my life, in my mind, from my perspective, I don't know if I can call those happiness. I really, it's interesting because like I never really started questioning whether or not it exists until I was like, you know, reading and like diving into some philosophy lectures and things like this that got into this question. But I think in the grand scheme of things, you know, it's something we all have to figure out for ourselves. And, you know, again, maybe it's a semantics thing, you know, like maybe what you call happiness, I would call like bliss or whatever. Or maybe what I call contentment, you would call happiness. You know, like, I mean, we all have to create these own definitions for ourselves and figure out, you know, like where we want to be at in our life, etc. But yeah, I mean, I think it's totally valid to question whether or not it exists. I mean, I'm not saying you have to think that, you know, it's, maybe I'm crazy. I mean, I think, again, you know, we're all mad here. But, yeah, just like what, Meme said there, happiness is what it is.
All right, so let me hit you with this. What if it is unhappiness that leads us to happiness, right? Because the thing is, like, again, gonna lean on the human condition, Ron. Have a drink. That's, you know, if we are comfortable, right? If we are content, for my understanding of content, if we are comfortable, we don't feel like we need to do anything, right? We've got everything that we need. I mean, you know, it's fine. It'll work. No problems, right? I'm gonna chuck another little image here in the chat space because growth is painful and change is painful. But staying somewhere where you're not supposed to be, right? That's just shit. That's a shit go. You don't feel good, right? It's not nice to be there. You feel uncomfortable, and due to that uncomfortable slash unhappiness, you're forced to seek something different. And when you do, when you make that change, because you know growth can be painful, we push through these changes through these. Again, going back to the same as what I was saying with the video game analogy there, right? We grind, we push, whether it's to get another job, whether it's to get another partner, or anything else. We push through the pain, whatever it is that we need to do to reach somewhere again that can be comfortable. But when we first get there, thinking about all the things that we've been through, you're in a shit place, right? Whether we're going to attach in a relationship, right? So you're in a shit relationship, you're being abused, whether it's, you know, mentally, physically, financially, doesn't matter. You're in an uncomfortable place, you didn't like it, right? You found the courage to push yourself to leave the situation, to move somewhere else, to move to higher ground. And it's a struggle. It's hard to do. You get there, you get to this new zone. You find yourself, right? That Zen zone where you're like, yep, I left all of this trash behind me. I am now in a better place. You are happy while you're there because you just got there. Now, over time, this comfort can, you know, lead to another zone of unhappiness. And then again, we go through the same process again and again and again and again. And this is what growth is, right? So what if, going back to the same question, what if it is the unhappiness that leads to happiness? Again, going back to, you know, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, I mean, and to me that totally makes perfect sense. Just like, you know, like getting into one of these like old Buddhist fables or whatever. I don't know what you want to call them, fables, lessons, etc. They were basically talking about, you know, like the idea of Zen and staying in like that place of you know, like perfect contentment, etc. They were basically talking about if you stay in that place, then nothing ties you to this world anymore, right? Like it's going back and forth, you know, like filling that contrast, etc., that keeps you, you know, existing on this plane. Like if you were able to permanently, you know, just like lock yourself in that state of Zen, and I mean there are people that hold it for very long times, you know, etc. But like I totally, maybe this ties into the happiness thing too, right? Like I feel like you lose perspective of it, right? Like it just becomes the norm. I mean, I also feel like this is why you can't just have like perfect utopia world, right? Because without any contrast, it would just be monotony. You know, like imagine kids that were born into utopia, never knew anything different. You know, took their soma every time like a bad feel came along. You know, and they never even had like the concept of like things could be different than this exact way it is. You know, I mean, is that perfection? Is that happiness? I mean, to me, that's monotony. Like, you have to have that contrast. Like, contrast is literally the flavor of existence in my mind.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what we were saying before when it comes to like the drilling the hole in the back of the head. And that, if you're in that state all the time, like that's going to become like the norm, right? So how do you get happier than happy, right? How are you going to have that contrast? How is anything going to be different? And I think that once we get
How
into
do
that,
I get more happier, Cope?
we need to download more happiness, right? Just to, increase the internet speed, download more happiness, and you'll be fine.
Yes, I feel like I need 5 more happinesses. And Azaria, how many more happinesses do you need right now? I'm sure Azaria is probably sitting over there like, I need about 12 more happinesses at this moment. But
well, look, you say that, but I've mentioned in the past as well. I've had friends that kind of like rate their happiness based on the likes that they get on social media. Isn't that kind of like what we're talking about here, right? You need to download more happiness, right? That in itself is a problem.
You know what that is, Cuff? That is like needing other people's validation of your happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the biggest problem I have with social media. Is it just like reinforces the idea of validation seeking. You know what I'm saying? Like it breeds narcissism. It's like you know, like I think we've all seen like the people that go on Facebook to do like absolutely nothing but bitch about anything and everything. I left the house today. It was fucking terrible. Got the gas station. It was a dick. You know, my kid's school called today, and blah blah blah. You know what I'm saying? Like there are people that literally do nothing but spend all day just going onto Facebook or Instagram or whatever to literally do nothing but bitch. Like that is their thing. That's all they do. That's what they're known for. You know, everybody knows like, oh look, there's fucking sad sack or whatever bitching about everything again. But here's the thing, like whenever we keep reinforcing that behavior with, you know, like, oh, how many likes did I get for bitching today? Ooh, well, I'm gonna bitch twice as hard tomorrow. I mean, I feel like it's not healthy, but like it totally works both ways. You know, like people start like needing to validate their happiness for the same reason. You know, like, oh look, I climbed Machu Picchu, and look at me standing on top of Machu Picchu. Oh, it only got 1 like. Well, I guess it wasn't as impressive as I thought it was. But yeah, like whenever we need other people's thoughts and opinions about ourselves and our actions to reinforce and like justify the things we do, it's just, you know, to me, like it's not coming from a place of like any kind of like wholeness or anything like that. It's needing other people's validation is just I don't know. I mean, like I've been there, trust me. But like I feel like whenever I think about going back to that, like it just makes me want to cringe. You know, like even with Steam, like I think I used to like look at, ooh, well, who voted for me? How many votes did I get? Azaria didn't vote my last post. I hate her. No, but you know what I'm saying?
How
like,
dare you.
no, but I mean, like once you just realize like that shit really doesn't fucking matter. I'm just gonna do what I do, and if other people like it or whatever, you know, that's on them. Like I feel like it's whenever you're living your life for other people's validation, you're not just doing it for yourself. You know, like everything that you do is premeditated, right? You're like, well, is so and so gonna like this? You know, and then like I adapt my behavior based on other people's interactions. It's just like, fuck all of that. Like, just throw it all out the fucking window. Do what I want to do, and allow, you know, the law of attraction, the universe, whatever, to put like-minded individuals in my path and just go on. But like we get so caught up like hanging on to, like toxic people or other people's validation. I mean, it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult thing because, like I said, this. Well, I've had a few friends, but this one in particular, Ron was mentioning that he's seen like a headline saying that a person was trying to kill themselves because they didn't get enough likes and that kind of thing. That is essentially what this individual that I'm talking about. That's the zone they were at, right? They were already in a negative state for whatever mental health issues, and this was just kind of like adding to it. But what it does for me is, like, even though I'm just like, dude, man, that's some fucked up shit, man. It still makes me feel for, like, what has this person been through to make them feel that this is necessary. This is such a big part of their life, of their personality, of, like, who they are as an individual, to have such a deep impact. I mean, like, at the same time, I'm also known for saying things like, well, just because you have, like, an issue, like whether it's a mental health issue or whatever, it doesn't mean that you get to force your shit onto other people. You can't just be a dick because you have some problems. But I try and find that zone of understanding. Like, okay, well, let's really look into it. So this person, for whatever reason, has grown up in their life having to have other people give them the pat on the back and say, "Oh, you are fantastic and you're brilliant," whatever it is, whether you're writing or whether you're bitching, whatever it is. They've had this happen to them enough times that they have a dependency on it. And we start looking at the sort of like the physical, side of things. We go, okay, well, there's serotonin levels, there's chemical reactions that are happening within the body when this is going on, blah blah, etc. And we've discussed in the past the difference between having, like, an addiction that we can say it's a physical addiction or a psychological addiction. But there can be some interesting things that happen within the human brain. So, say, for instance, like video game addiction, like there's literally no drug being put into your body, but there's this thing that's happening. Sex addiction, same thing. Tiger Woods, right? He was addicted to sex, right? That's what happened. But there's these things that can happen. And if we dial that into this same area, we go, okay, well, this person's gone through something where they feel that they need to be validated. There's a chemical reaction that happens in the brain when people like their stuff or show that they like what they're saying. Like, even in a physical environment, like I'm standing in front of you and I'm making you laugh. Like, my happiness comes from me making you laugh because I know that when you're laughing, you're happy and I've made you happy. And I do get an understanding for it. I mean, it's not that I agree with it, but we have to have that understanding of it to be able to help people that are like to apply interventions and to help them get through it. Because ultimately, if this person that Ron was talking about did commit suicide because they didn't get enough likes, like, what kind of a world are we living in where this is the norm, right? Because, like I said, I've literally dealt with people that are in the same boat.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Like, when you're seeking other people's validation of your, like, your suicide, like, I feel like it's kind of like, and again, I'm not saying this is why everybody does it, right? What I am saying is, like, when you're so committed to, like, seeking other people's validation that you get to the point where you're going to kill yourself to get somebody's attention, I feel like it's totally hit that moment of, like, peak insanity, right? Because, like, when you're willing to do something so drastic to get somebody's attention and make them feel something, etc., to validate your existence, that you're gonna no longer exist to make it happen. Yikes, right? But I mean, I think.
But is it the drive?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to downplay suicide. I mean, there's tons of people.
Yeah.
There's tons of reasons why people get suicidal. But I mean, here's the thing. I think I would say, like, whenever people go, I even hate to, like, generalize this, man, because I feel like we do a lot of things to raise awareness about suicide here. But I think it's only fair to fucking counteract this, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. Like, whenever you're, like, threatening suicide in, like, an attention-seeking manner, like, it's fucked, dude. Like, to me, that is, like, one of the worst ways you can emotionally manipulate someone. Like, I don't feel like that's fair on any level. And I have literally zero problems with cutting somebody out of my life if they're threatening to kill themselves if I don't do something, like something like that. Like, I think we see it a lot in relationships. Oh, if you're gonna break up with me, then I'm gonna kill myself. Like, okay, well, go ahead. Like, I'm not even gonna try to talk you out of it, because that is the worst fucking emotional manipulation you can put on someone. Fuck that. But at the same time, like, if you're going through shit, like, you're really fucking struggling, and you come to me to, like, fucking talk through this kind of shit, I'll fucking stay up all night going through it, trying to help people. But I feel like there are very different places you can come from with this problem. Like, whenever you're doing this for attention or validation, like, it really fucking upsets me. Because, like,
Yeah.
it's not right to put that on other people. And it's not right to make, like, that's not something you should be crying wolf with. But people do it. And I mean, like, honestly, I've had to think back over it, and I feel like one time it could arguably be said that I was doing it, but at the time, I legitimately was serious. And it is what it is, right? Like, I've totally had to, like, go back and examine this, and I get it. Like, that's not something you should ever just dump on another person and try to, like, blame them for. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's... It's not right. It's not fair. And it's something that, like, I feel like we all have to be able to, like, make that judgment call for ourselves. We're not responsible for other people's actions. But I do totally think that we can help people, if they're, like, legitimately seeking help. But what I see on social media is not that, if that makes sense. Like, whenever people are like, oh my god, this day sucks, I'm going to kill myself, like, fuck that, dude. Tell them to shut the fuck up. Like, that's not appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, look, I'll be honest with you. That big list of topics that we had for this evening, or topics list that I've got happening, there's something I removed from that, just because it was a little bit iffy, touchy, that kind of thing. And it's literally exactly what you're talking about when we get to that zone of people that are trying to manipulate another person with the threat of suicide. And the reason why I removed it was essentially because I've got a story that I've been sort of like up in the air whether I'm going to, maybe we can do that as well, getting the show. But something that's interesting to me is the separate world that you exist in when this is going on. Something that we've mentioned a few times in the past is, when we look at society and other people, we have like that 20/20 vision. Like when you're watching somebody that's in a bad relationship, an abusive relationship, you go, hey man, don't do that, right? You shouldn't be dating that guy or that girl because they're abusing you and etc. But when you're in it yourself, it can be very difficult to see. And when you're in it, when you're in the fog of war, as I like to call it, it can be difficult to see the forest trees. It can be difficult for a lot of things, and you end up doing things that are stupid, that are ridiculous, and it can be hard to get out of that tailspin. And as much as it's not a good thing to go through this kind of experience, but a lot of us do go through it at some point in our lives, to some degree, and it can be very detrimental to a person's mental health, their stability, their understanding of life and the world around them. And I definitely think it's something that we need to sort of like dedicate a larger amount of time than this last 10 minutes of the show. But how can the person that's in that fog see through it? So say for instance, your partner says, "Oh, I'm going to kill myself. If you don't, whatever it is." Because you're in that relationship, you've known the person, you had that attachment for X amount of time. Maybe even know what they're capable of. Maybe they've hurt themselves in the past. It can be difficult for an individual to have that perspective, like what you were saying there. It's like, all right, well, go ahead, man. I don't care. And look, I'll be real with you. Ultimately, I got to that zone, but it took me a long time to get there. It took me it took me a decade to get there. And what happens to a person in that time can be detrimental. So, as much as I'm just like, yeah, man, that's some fucked up shit, I can also understand how that plays out, being a player in that air quotes game, and it's not nice.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you, man. Like, it's... I feel like it's such a fucking complicated issue, and I feel like it's something that we shouldn't, like, downplay. It's not something to play chicken with, right? But at the same time, I feel like that there are there are totally people that use this as like a validation check. You know what I'm saying? Like they do this to get your attention. And to me, I feel like that has got to be one of the most toxic things to throw out at somebody. Now, like I feel like whenever you're willing to like use something like this for emotional manipulation to try to, like make somebody do what you want them to do, or like make the world be the way you want it to be, etc. I I really like don't know where else to go with that other than you have to be willing to like fucking separate and let the universe work itself out. At the same time, I'm totally all on board with like helping people work through things, finding resources. But I mean, also, I feel like most of the people that I've met that are like legitimately suicidal, whenever I've been there myself, what really is missing is like a lack of any kind of like connection, right? Like you feel isolated and alone in the universe. Nobody will ever, like understand me, etc. It feels like there's no point to anything. Like whenever you get to that point, like even just having somebody to fucking talk to, can oftentimes be enough, right? But I totally, I feel like we're almost talking about like two completely separate things, right? Because there are people that are legitimately suicidal, and then there are people that are emotionally manipulative assholes that throw out that word to fucking scare you. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, I mean, we all obviously have to be able to figure it out and get there for ourselves. But when people will throw that out, like playing fucking chicken crying wolf with you and, like seeing where you'll balk, I mean, obviously, I guess, like, after just having enough experience with it, it's always dicey, I mean, like, could they be serious, Yeah. And I mean, like one of the things that I've had to get to, and I mean, I think it very much comes from being there myself, is like we have to be able to accept that we ultimately have no control over what another person does, and we cannot blame ourselves for when somebody does something like this, right? I don't blame them. I mean, I feel like we all have to be able to like face the fact that yes, it is an option, and you can choose it if you'd like. I mean, I would rather you don't, especially not for like, reasons that, I mean, like even like getting into like the legitimate issues, right? Like I feel like when people are like chronically ill, don't like there's literally no recovery coming like that. I mean, I can totally accept that. I mean, I feel like if I got to the point where I'm, like terminal stage cancer, like my life is miserable as fuck, I would love to have the option to say, like, okay, guys, like get my affairs in order, tell everyone goodbye, and check out. But I also don't think this is something that people should just be choosing because, like, I had a bad day at school, somebody was mean to me, etc. But, I mean, I also feel like being able to, like, communicate and have these conversations is the only cure here, right? Because if we're afraid to talk about these things and we're afraid to dive into them, then people are going to keep getting more and more isolated because, it's like, oh, I can't talk to anybody about this, they'll think I'm crazy. It's like, I mean, there are plenty of people out there that have gone through it and they will listen. But I feel like that's part of the problem. Is like if you're not like looking, you're not, getting outside of like the small circle you may be in that like you feel completely isolated from the world from. It's a very dynamic issue that I guess we didn't really have time to get into for like 10 minutes, but
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess maybe we'll get back into it some more next week. But yeah, I do gotta get up early. Working wage slaving is, it's killing me, Cope. But I'm still here, and I'll be here next week.
Oh, good. Well, it's only fires and floods that are killing me, but physical versus mental. It is what it is, right? We do what we do, so we be who bees.
Yeah. Cope's down there in the giant sweat shack, but yeah, man. Again, actually, that reminds me. I want to share something.
We got 1 minute. Make it quick, bro.
If anybody is a PC gamer and would like to help Australia, 100% of proceeds are going to Australia. And we got some time for some weird noises, so thanks everybody. Much love. Good night. Boom.